right? Spiritual maturity, you need to learn to run to God first before you run your mouth. You got to have some couth about you, especially for my ladies, which is who I primarily talk to. Sometimes you got to go to a place more than once before it's built all the way back up. And sometimes you have to go to a place more than once with other people. And guess what? You don't need their buy-in because you already have God's buy-in. I ain't that person who's going to tell you don't cut nobody off. Cut them off, sis. Y'all, what's up, and welcome back to another Bible study with me. This is actually long overdue because it has been quite some time since I've done a new Bible study with me. If y'all know me, y'all know I love doing a study straight out the Bible, okay? Straight out of it, all right? So we do not have a guided book today. I literally just have a message that was downloaded into me today, and I was like, okay, let me look for evidence of this. Every time I have a thought where I'm like, is this a divine download? I always go look for evidence to support the thought. And when I say I look for evidence, I look in the Bible. If I have what I believe is a divine download and I cannot find evidence of that in the Bible, then it's not a divine download. Like, it's just a thought I had to myself. But when I have it and I'm able to find the evidence, that is what normally results into a Bible study, which is why it's been kind of a little bit hard for me to consistently put these out, because I have to be in a certain state of mind. So I've also recently, by the way, before we get into this, have gotten into drinking smoothies. You guys know that I am a nutrition coach, and so I talk a lot about eating consistently, eating healthy, whole foods, because that really influences not only your body and the way that you operate, but it also influences your spirituality, your connection with the Holy Spirit, your connection with God. Like, if you are eating a bunch of processed foods and gunk and your body is not operating the way that God designed it to operate, it is going to be harder for you to hear. And fasting, as we see in the Bible, is used as a tool where it's a abstaining from certain foods, or abstaining from food altogether, creates this intense spiritual environment where you can hear things that you may not have been able to previously hear. So this is actually the bottom of my smoothie today, even though I'm not fasting. But this one was strawberries, blueberries. I'll leave the recipe in the chat below. Let's go ahead and get into this. So the message that I heard earlier was stop making announcements and start making moves. Stop making announcements and start making moves. And at first I thought, this isn't for me. This is for my clients, because I do business coaching and I do nutrition coaching. And I thought, this is for my clients, because the amount of people I talk to every week that are wanting to make this grand entrance and have this big launch, but the emphasis that we put on launching as a term and launching as a concept is so heavy. And then I thought about myself and I said, well, maybe this message is for me, because every time God gives me a download doesn't mean that I have to go make this big announcement about it on social media. Sometimes it's just for me, and I don't have to always say what I'm doing. And I've come across a few clients who say, well, I don't really want to make this announcement because I don't know if it's going to be real yet. I don't know if this is real to me. I don't want to, tell everybody I'm doing 75 hard. I don't want to tell everybody I'm doing this business. I don't want to tell everybody that I hired a health coach, because I want it to be real first. And when I'm having this conversation, I always ask myself, well, what is real to you? Like, when you're saying you want it to be real first, what does that mean? Does that mean that you want an out if you decide to quit? Does that mean that you don't want to be held accountable by other people or outside sources? Does that mean that you don't want to feel guilt or shame when you decide to stop something after you started and stopped this thing already so many times? Is it because you've done that in the past? And so you have to start asking yourself these questions like, why am I the person who doesn't want to make the announcement? Why am I the person who does want to make the announcement? Because there is no straight right or wrong answer. I'm sorry if you're new here, by the way. There is no straight right or wrong answer. It's really dependent on you and where you are in this season, which is why it's so important that when you watch videos like this one, that you don't just take what I say and run with it. I want you to listen to what I'm saying, and I want this to encourage you and push you to open your Bible and read it for yourself. Because what I'm going to share with you that I got out of it, you may hear something completely different, because the way that God talks to me and the Holy Spirit communicates with me may be different from what he says to you and communicates with you based off of the season that you're in and your assignment. We may not have the same assignment. We may not, right? Let's go ahead and kick it off. So today's reading is from Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2. I have my study Bible here. Let's get our thumbnail picture. But we're looking at the book of Nehemiah today, chapter 2, and I'm just going to read the entire chapter 2 section because honestly, it's not that long, okay? And then I'm going to give you my observations of what it means in the biblical sense to stop making announcements and start making moves. In Nehemiah 2, it starts off, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King, we're going to call him King Art because I don't know how to pronounce his name, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. So also a little bit about Nehemiah. He was a cupbearer, and a cupbearer is somebody who tastes the king's wine before the king tastes the wine to make sure it's not poisoned. Okay. And so him and the king had a pretty decent relationship. Like, he's basically like saving his life. I mean, he's not dead, but he's making sure that the king doesn't die by poison. And so they have a decent relationship. They see each other's face and facial expressions. They're around each other a lot. So the king notices, like, hey, you look kind of sad. Like, you good? Like, I see you every day. What's up? I know you're not sick. That's what he says, right? I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? So Nehemiah says, my hometown, like, is burned to the ground. Like, that's why I'm sad. And the king says, well, what do you want? What do you want? And then it says, then I prayed to the God of heaven, and this is Nehemiah speaking, then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. So he's asking the king, listen, if it pleases you, I would love to go and rebuild the city, okay? But notice he prayed first. And then verse 6 says, then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. So the king said, how long are you going to be gone? He told him. Verse 7 says, I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have the letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they park, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates in the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my request. So he basically says, okay, so I'm going to go, but can you also give me this letter that is going to, make sure that I get what I need in order to do this, because I ain't got no tools, no resource, none of that. Like, I don't have nowhere to live, none of that. So can you give me, some additional help? And the king says, sure. The king says, sure, right? So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. So he said, cool, I'm going to give you the letters. You can take those. I'm also going to send you a little bit of protection. Like, you got to come back, homeboy. You're my cupbearer. You got to come back alive. So he gave him what he needed. Verse 2 says, when Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So then some of the other leaders in the kingdom are like, the king let you go do something in your hometown for the Israelites? Like, so they feeling a little iffy, right? They're feeling a little iffy. Then in verse 11, it says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone that what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. So he went to Jerusalem. He stayed there for 3 days. And then in the middle of the night, he went out to look. So he didn't just go straight into Jerusalem and looking around. He didn't do it in the daylight. He was on the low. Okay. He was moving on the low. And so he went out there. He took the least amount of people as possible. and the least amount of stuff, and went out there and looked at the walls. And verse 13 says, by night I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So he had to get off of his horse. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. So he not only went in there at night, he didn't tell anybody, like not even the people that were going to be helping him rebuild. He didn't tell them nothing. He just went up there by himself just to kind of like survey the land, see what was going on, figure out the plan. Then I said to them, in verse 17, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king has said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. So then finally he brought the people in, let them know like, hey, this is what's happening. And the people said, let us start rebuilding. Okay, so they began the good work. Verse 19 says, but when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. So the two people that was kind of acting like a little funky earlier was like, they came and started making fun of him. Okay. What is this you are doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. So at this point, he says, listen, I'm not even worried about all that yapping you doing from the peanut gallery. God told me to do this. And the king gave me way. And I don't have no shame. He basically said, you have no share in this. You don't have no claim to this historic right. This is not your land. This is not for your people. Like, basically, this is an A and B conversation between me and God. So see your way out of it. That's what he said. Okay. So that's all of chapter 2 that I just read. I have a couple of observations, and you could clearly see from what I just read how he didn't need to make no announcement. He literally only told one person. He told the king. He just started making moves. He was sad. Somebody said, what's wrong with the king? Said, what's wrong with you? He prayed, and then he started making moves. He didn't ask no questions. He didn't ask no questions. He didn't even ask the king questions. He didn't doubt himself. He literally just took the immediate response of what God said through the king and went with it. Okay. Here are my observations. And this is how I want you to really take this and use it. Number one, he prayed first. He prayed first. He didn't just go off of his emotions and said, this is how I feel. And the king asked me what's wrong. So I'm just going to tell the king what's wrong with me. And I'm going to blow up and I'm going to do all this. With emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity, he prayed. And I got to say both of those two things, because a lot of us don't have spiritual maturity. We think, oh, I feel this way, and because I feel this way, this is what I deserve, or this is what is due to me, or I'm just going to say exactly how I feel without having any type of conversation with God first before I say something to somebody else here about how I'm feeling, right? Spiritual maturity, you need to learn to run to God first before you run your mouth. Run to God first before you run your mouth, okay? That was the first thing. First thing, before he even responded. When the king said, what is that you want? He prayed. The other piece of this is emotional intelligence. He still showed up to work. He still did his job. He was not complaining, even though he felt that burden that his hometown, I keep calling it his hometown, that his hometown had been destroyed and burned down. He didn't say, oh man, they done burned all my homies to the ground. I just give up. I'm not going to do nothing. Or he didn't say, oh, I'm just going to rebel and be crazy and curse everybody out and be mad. Like, you got to have some couth about you, especially for my ladies, which is who I primarily talk to. Have some couth about you. Carry yourself a certain way, even if you feel anger, even if you feel sadness, and you're allowed to feel anger, resentment, sadness. I feel all of those things. I'm a very emotional person. Okay. I feel all of those things, but carry yourself a certain way. And I had to learn this over the years. And I can think of recent moments in the last year where I struggled with this to carry, to not carry my emotions on my sleeve and to work on my emotional intelligence and to sit, what we call it now is sitting in your feminine energy. Sit in your feminine energy. You don't have to overly express and be so aggressive, and like, you don't have to do all that. God's going to give you what you need, but you got to have some balance to this thing, okay? So that's the first thing. He prayed first. Like, you got to pray first. The second thing that I noticed about this in this chapter is he only told the one person he needed to tell. He didn't tell everybody. And this is a part of the stop making announcements and start making moves piece of what we're talking about. Is you don't have to tell 5, 6, 7, 8 different people. And guess what? You don't need approval from 5, 6, 7 different 8 people. You only need to tell. And most times you don't really need to say anything to anybody. But in his case, he needed to tell the one person who could do 3 things for him: time, protection, and resources. That's the only reason why he said anything to the king. And that's the only everything he needed in order to complete that assignment outside of what God had already told him. He went to the one person who could give him that. Time, I need this amount of time off of work. Protection, I need to be protected as I'm taking this journey. And resources, I need timber to rebuild these walls. I need somewhere to live. Can you make that happen for me? That's the only person he talked to. This is why it's important that you have someone who can do things like time, resources, and protection. Now, I'm not saying that if you work a job, then you need to go to your supervisor and say, I need some time off because God told me to do such and such. I'm not saying that. But I am saying line them ducks up in a row. You might have to ask for time off or submit a time off request, but you ain't got to tell all the other things. If that person, if your supervisor is not also providing you with whatever else you need in order to facilitate the assignment, then you don't need to give all that information to that person. It's not necessary. Now, for a lot of y'all, what it means is if you don't have anybody to talk to about that, or anybody who can guide you through and tell you this is where you get your protection, this is where you get your resources, this is how you facilitate this journey in a way that is going to be safe, to make it safe and successful, then you need a coach, because that's what a coach is. I don't sell coaching, and I don't coach people because I want to be a 7-figure entrepreneur. I could be a 7-figure whatever, anything, because God has already told me, hey, you're going to live an abundant life. You know why I sell coaching? Because people are in serious need and have a serious lack of resources, planning, execution, protection, strategy. And it would be a miss if I saw a vast amount of people who needed that thing. And that's the skill that God gave me, and I was not using it to help other people facilitate their purpose that is on their life, or the calling that is on their life. If you don't have nobody you can go to and say, hey, can you help me with this, and this, without that person asking a ton of questions, because you notice this, the king didn't ask him a whole bunch of questions. The king didn't say, well, you doing this for who and why and what? And I don't know about that. I tried that before. There was no lip service. The king said, you need what, and what? All right, cool. I'm going to write you this letter. Here's what you do. Hand this to so-and-so, and you good. That's what a coach is. Okay? A lot of us have people that want to come back and ask questions and question the assignment and question the journey and create self-doubt and all this other types of stuff in our head. So he only told that one person. You really only need to tell like the minimum amount of people as possible. The people that are going to make that journey safe and successful. That's it. That's the only people who need to know. Okay. You don't owe nobody no explanation for what you're doing that God called you to do. Unless God said, go tell this person, don't tell that person. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3 is he moved in silence with a small circle. You will see that it says in the book. It says in the book, let me go to it. I set out during the night, verse 12. chapter 2, verse 12. I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. So the few people he took with him were also people who didn't question the assignment, because they didn't ask. It don't say in here. They didn't ask him where we going. And it says, I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts except the one I was riding on. He moved in silence with a small circle with the minimum amount needed to get the job done in that time. At that time. Because he wasn't going out there to rebuild the wall, so he knew he was going to have to go more than once. Come on, somebody. He knew he was going to have to go to the place of the rebuilding. He knew he was going to have to visit that place more than once. It was a journey. They're back, they're back, they're back, they're back. He knew he was going to have to go more than once. So the first time he went, sometimes you got to go to a place more than once before it's built all the way back up. And sometimes you have to go to a place more than once with other people. And guess what? You don't need their buy-in, because you already have God's buy-in. Stop asking for everybody's validation and waiting for people's validation for you to move on what God told you. If God told it to you, it's already validated. It's validated in the spiritual realm. Start moving like it. But he moved in silence with a small circle. Just the people he knew were not going to question his assignment. Okay? Number 4, the fourth observation. He made no announcements and needed no validation. We kind of meshed those together. So the new number 4 is going to be this piece, which I really, really loved. Okay? The new observation number 4. He said nothing to the people who would do the work. He said nothing to the people that would do the work. Because, yes, again, he did not need their buy-in. He already had God's buy-in. Now, this is something that we're taught in leadership. This is something that we're taught in the corporate world, in the business world, is, hey, if you have people on your team, or if there are people that are going to be helping you to complete a task or carry out an assignment or vision, you need to, as a good leader, you need to get these people's buy-in. It says, in verse 16, the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because I had yet said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or the officials or any others who would be doing the work. The only thing he said when he came back is, this is the trouble we're in. This is what needs to be done. And guess what the people said in response? In response, they replied in verse 17, let us start rebuilding. So they began his good work. Then nobody asked no questions. If you're in a space where you know that you are on God assignment and you are called to do this thing, and the people that you have asked to help you are, instead of actually helping you, are creating doubt and proposing questions that lead to stuckness. Stuckness is not even a word. If they're asking questions and creating doubt that leads to stagnancy, is stagnancy a word? Maybe. Those may not be the right people, or you may have told the wrong people. That's just a red flag for you. Now, if you say, this is my plan, and the person comes back and says, did you think about this, this, and this? Let's figure out a way to make sure that we have plugged up these possible holes, or let's make sure that, we have a plan B just in case this happens or this happens. That's completely different from someone just saying, are you sure you can do that? Are you sure that's what God said? I don't know. You ain't never done that before. I ain't never seen nobody do that. But is that even possible? That's a completely different conversation. You know if somebody's really trying to help you facilitate, like to do what you need to do, versus if somebody's just questioning you, to question you. And honestly, those are not people that just need to be cut out of your assignment. Those are people that should be cut out of your life. I ain't that person who's going to tell you don't cut nobody off. Cut them off, sis. It's 2025. I'm running with scissors because I don't have time. The calling is too big. The assignment is too heavy for me to be spending time going back and forth with y'all about what God told me. You with me or you not with me? That's it. Okay. And last observation number 5, people mocked him, they mocked Nehemiah, not knowing he was already given permission. The people they used to threaten you are already on your side. the officials came later on and they said to him in verse 19, "Are you rebelling against the king?" Baby, I already had the king's permission before I even got here. The king gave me permission 3 days ago. You 3 days late. Everything that you're trying to use right now in order to stop me, in order to scare me, in order to threaten me, the permission has already been given. The assignment has already been resourced. But guess what? God didn't say, I'm going to give you assignment and nobody's going to come up against you. Nothing's going to come up against you. Nobody's going to make fun of you. Nobody's going to talk about you. Just because somebody talks about you doesn't mean that you're not on assignment. It doesn't mean that you're called to do that thing. Too many of us are allowing other people's opinions to stop us from operating in what God has already told us to do. And maybe for some of y'all, it's a test of your faith. Because you're going to listen to these people or you're going to listen to God? Because you've already been resourced. You already have what you need. You've already been given the letters. You've already been given the timber. You've already been given the horses and the close circle. Those people are near you. If you don't have a coach, you've already been given the coach. The coach is in your sphere. Y'all be like, well, I don't have a coach. I don't have the resources to pay for a coach. You do look for it. Because it's never, God's not going to give you an assignment right now in this season that you don't have access to the resources for. You either have the resources or you have access to the resources of what you're supposed to be doing right now. Not the grand old thing. Did nobody tell you to go out and run a marathon right now? But you can run a mile. You can run half a mile. You have the resources and the ability and the strength and the energy to run half a mile. And guess what? Half a mile gets you a half a mile closer to running a marathon. So you have to look at, yeah, you've got this big vision, but you don't have to go accomplish the big vision in one day. You don't have to go accomplish the big vision in 1 year. What you do have to do is start moving and stop trying to make announcements and stop waiting to do this big old grand thing of, I want to have this grand opening. I want to have this big old launch. I want to have this website. I want to lose 50 pounds before I decide to, reintroduce myself and say, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm doing. I'm a nutrition coach, y'all. I'm still on a weight loss journey right now. I didn't wait until I got to my goal to start moving in what I feel like I'm called to do in this season. I started moving in the midst of it because I knew enough to know what I needed to do right now and how to impart in my clients right now. Because guess what? This is just an additional skill on the tool belt of skills that I've already been building. And it's the same thing for you. Every single time I talk to somebody who feels like they've been called to coach, I said, you are not new to this. This is an additional tool on your tool belt. This is in addition to. This is not the beginning of. It feels like it's the beginning of because it's a journey. And sometimes we get caught up in but I haven't been doing this. No, you've been doing it. Every single thing that has happened to you that brought you to this moment right here was all divine, all orchestrated for your good, for your purpose, and for your equipping. You didn't just start getting equipped today because the divine download happened today, or last week because it happened last week, or last month because you had the vision last month. You've been equipped since the day you were born. You're just now getting to the point where you're starting to realize, oh, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And what you'll actually find is as you start moving, when you stop worrying about making announcements and you start making moves, you'll start saying, ooh, this is actually kind of easy. Like, oh, I already knew how to do that. Oh, you already had that skill. I already had that connection. I already knew who to ask for such and such resource. Wow, I did not realize how easy this was going to be, how smooth this was going to be. And I'm not saying that you're not going to come up against some type of opposition or some type of friction, because friction and opposition builds character, and you still have to be sharpened because nobody's perfect. You still have to be sharpened, but it's going to feel a lot easier than what you think it is. It's going to be a lot less scary than what you think it is, especially if you tuned in and you tapped into the Holy Spirit and your ears are open and you're willing to listen and you're willing to move and mold. And you're okay with not having the full plan. Be okay with not having the full plan. Okay? It's a season of execution.